There was nothing unusual about that night, at least not at first. The event had been long, the kind that drags on with polite small talk, forced laughter, and too many speeches from people who love the sound of their own voices. My wife, Marlene, and I sat at our assigned table, exchanging tired smiles, sipping wine, and pretending to be engaged in conversations we didn't really care about. We had done this a dozen times before: company functions, networking events, the usual obligations of a professional couple. It was routine, familiar, a world where nothing unexpected ever happened. But the moment we stepped out of the venue and into the cool night air, something shifted. Marlene reached for my hand as we walked toward the parking lot, her fingers tightening around mine just a little too hard. I remember looking at her, wondering if something was wrong. Her expression was unreadable, calm, composed, but distant. I chalked it up to exhaustion. I should have known better. The first crack in the evening came when I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It vibrated just as we reached the car. A notification blinked on the screen. I glanced down, expecting a work email or maybe a group chat message. Instead, I saw 5 words that sent a chill straight down my spine. You need to know the truth. At first, I thought it was spam, maybe some random scam message. But then I saw the number. An unknown contact, no name attached. And below that first cryptic message, another one appeared. Check her phone. Now. I stopped in my tracks. My heart, steady just moments ago, suddenly pounded against my ribs. My breath caught in my throat. Everything okay? Marlene asked, her voice soft, casual. I looked up at her. She was already in the passenger seat, buckling her seatbelt, watching me with mild curiosity. I forced a tight smile, but my fingers felt numb as I slid my phone back into my pocket. Check her phone? It was absurd, completely irrational. Marlene and I had been together for 10 years, married for 7. I had never had a reason to doubt her, not once. And yet, something about those messages, something about the way they arrived, unprovoked, in the middle of an otherwise uneventful night, made my stomach twist into knots. I climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly as I started the car. Marlene turned to me, eyes scanning my face. You sure you're okay? She asked again. I hesitated. I could have asked her right then and there. I could have laughed it off, showed her the messages, and watched as she rolled her eyes and called it nonsense. But something inside me, some instinct I didn't yet understand, made me hold back. Yeah, I said, forcing a small chuckle. Just a weird message. Probably spam. Marlene gave a small nod, then reached for her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly. And as we pulled out of the parking lot, my mind raced with a single thought. What if it wasn't spam? The drive home should have been quiet, just the usual silence that settles after a long night. But this time, every moment felt stretched, every second filled with something I couldn't name, something heavy, something suffocating. Marlene sat beside me, scrolling through her phone, the soft glow of the screen illuminating her face. She looked so normal, so composed, as if nothing in the world was out of place. But something was out of place. That message. It was just sitting there in my pocket, buzzing in the back of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. Check her phone. Now. Couldn't shake it. I glanced over at her, trying to keep my expression neutral. Her thumb flicked across the screen, her lips pressed into a slight frown. Maybe she was just checking emails. Maybe she was reading the news. Or maybe, I swallowed hard and forced my eyes back to the road. Who are you texting? I asked, keeping my tone light. Marlene didn't even look up. Oh, just Tessa. She left early, wanted to make sure we had a good time. Tessa. That made sense. They worked together. They were close. But then, almost as if my own mind was betraying me, I remembered something. Tessa had left hours ago. I knew because I had watched her go, waving a quick goodbye as she slipped out before dessert was even served. Marlene hadn't mentioned anything about texting her earlier, so why now? The doubt spread, slow and insidious. I knew I was probably overreacting, but once the thought was in my head, it wouldn't leave. Marlene had never given me a reason to suspect her of anything. And yet, that message, the one that had come out of nowhere, had cracked something open inside me, something I couldn't ignore. I tried to push it down, tried to reason with myself. It was probably just a joke, a prank, someone with the wrong number. And yet, my hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. She set her phone down on her lap, staring out the window as the streetlights cast long shadows across her face. I knew I shouldn't do it. I knew it was wrong. But my fingers itched to reach for her phone, to check, to know. The voice in my head whispered again, check her phone. Now. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I took a slow breath and tried to sound normal. Tessa said, anything interesting? Marlene glanced at me, then smiled. A soft, easy smile that should have reassured me. She was just asking about the event. Nothing special. And that was the moment I felt it. The first real, undeniable shift in my gut. Because she was lying. I knew she was lying. And I had no idea why. By the time we pulled into the driveway, my heart was beating a little too fast, my thoughts spinning in circles. Marlene stretched in her seat, letting out a soft sigh. Finally home, she murmured, rubbing her temples. That event was exhausting. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my mind was elsewhere. Why did she lie? I had replayed it over and over in my head. If she really was texting Tessa, why hadn't she mentioned it earlier? Why had she waited until we were in the car? And why did she act so casual about it, as if she wasn't just feeding me a perfectly crafted line? She opened the car door and grabbed her purse, stepping out without hesitation. I followed, my hands clammy as I locked the car behind me. Inside, everything was just as we had left it. Our coats still hanging by the door, the faint scent of Marlene's vanilla candle filling the living room. It should have been comforting. It should have felt like home. But something had shifted. I stood there for a second, watching her. She slipped off her heels, wincing slightly, then walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Normal. Completely normal. So why did I feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff? I reached into my pocket, feeling the weight of my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating. I wanted to respond to that message. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I did something I never thought I would do. I glanced at Marlene. Her back was turned as she scrolled through her phone at the kitchen counter. I took a step closer. Hey, I said casually. Can I borrow your phone for a second? Mine's almost dead. She froze. Just for a second. A fraction of a second. But I saw it. It was quick, almost imperceptible. A tiny pause, a flicker of hesitation in her shoulders before she turned around, smiling. Oh, she said, glancing at my phone in my hand. You can just use yours. It's fine. My stomach twisted. I know, but I was going to check something, and my battery's low, I said, keeping my voice light. She hesitated again, a little longer this time. Then, slowly, she placed her phone on the counter. But her hand didn't move away from it. Something was wrong. I could feel it, thick in the air between us. And then she did something that shattered the illusion completely. She laughed. But it wasn't her normal laugh. It was forced, too light, too easy, like someone trying to play off a bad joke. What's with the sudden interest in my phone? She teased. I shrugged. It's not sudden. Just need to check something real quick. She picked up the phone, held it tighter, and then she said it. I'd rather not. Privacy and all. Privacy. We had been married for 7 years. She had never cared before. The first crack had formed. And I knew that if I didn't figure out what was going on, it would only get bigger. I stood there, staring at Marlene as her fingers curled around her phone like a lifeline. Her words echoed in my head. I'd rather not. Privacy and all. Privacy. That single word felt like a brick being dropped onto my chest. It wasn't the word itself that got to me. It was the way she said it. Too casual, too dismissive. Like she was trying to brush off something she didn't want me to touch. Marlene had never cared about privacy before. We shared everything. Phones, passwords, Even dumb inside jokes about how we were each other's backup plans, if either of us ever forgot our logins. So why now? My throat felt dry. Privacy, I repeated, forcing a chuckle. Come on, Marlene. It's just your phone. She smiled, but there was tension behind it. Exactly. It's my phone. There it was again. That shift in her voice. A few months ago, she wouldn't have even thought twice about handing me her phone. So why was she suddenly acting like I was asking for her social security number? I took a step closer, keeping my tone light. Okay, I get it. You don't want me looking through your messages. But it's just... Before I could finish, she let out a soft sigh and rubbed her temples. Leo, she said gently, are you feeling okay? You've been acting weird since we left the event. I felt my jaw tighten. She was flipping it on me. Classic misdirection. Act concerned. Make me seem like the one who was overreacting. But I wasn't falling for it. I shrugged, pretending to let it go. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired. She studied my face for a second, as if she wasn't sure whether to believe me. Then, as if nothing had happened, she took a sip of her water, set her phone down face down on the counter, and walked toward the bedroom. But I didn't move. I stood there, staring at that phone, my mind racing. I had two choices. I could let this go. I could pretend that everything was fine, chalk it up to paranoia, and trust my wife. Or I could find out the truth. I swallowed hard and glanced toward the hallway. The bedroom door clicked shut. She was in there, probably getting ready for bed. I had seconds to make a decision. I reached for the phone. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. My fingers hovered over the screen. The moment I pressed the power button, the lock screen lit up, and my stomach dropped. A new message had just come in. From a number with no name. 4 words. Just 4. Did he check yet? I swear my entire world tilted. I felt sick. My ears started ringing. My breath came in shallow gasps. And suddenly, everything made sense. The hesitation, the laughter, the fake concern. The way she held onto that phone like her life depended on it. I had my answer, but I wasn't ready for it. Not yet. I stood frozen, staring at the glowing screen as if those 4 words had physically struck me. Did he check yet? It was undeniable now. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't some misunderstanding. Something was happening. Something my wife didn't want me to know. And someone out there was waiting for my reaction. I felt like I had just stepped onto a thin sheet of ice, only now realizing the cracks had been spreading beneath my feet for months. Maybe even longer. My fingers hovered over the screen. My pulse pounded in my ears. I had a choice to make. Do I open the message? Do I go all the way? If I did, there was no turning back. I would be opening Pandora's box, and whatever was inside would change everything. A sharp clatter from the bedroom snapped me out of my daze. Marlene. She was moving around, opening drawers, rustling through her things. If I stood here much longer, she'd come back out. I shoved the phone back onto the counter, face down, exactly how she had left it. Then, I turned away and forced myself to move, my legs feeling like lead. As I reached the bedroom, I found Marlene standing in front of the mirror, pulling off her earrings. She glanced at me through the reflection and smiled. There you are, she said softly. I thought you got lost in the kitchen. She was so damn normal, so casual, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just gotten a message that proved she was hiding something from me. I swallowed down the storm of emotions swirling in my gut and nodded. Just needed a second. She turned around, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. You sure you're okay? You've been acting different all night. There it was again. That tactic. Make me second-guess myself. Put me on the defensive. I wasn't falling for it this time. I sat on the edge of the bed, forcing my voice to sound calm. You really don't want me to see your phone? Marlene's expression didn't change. Not at first. But her hand, still holding one of her earrings, twitched ever so slightly. She tilted her head and let out a soft laugh. Leo, are we really doing this? As if I was the one making things weird. as if I was the one suddenly treating my phone like a vault of government secrets. I met her gaze steady now. I just don't get why it's a big deal. She hesitated. For half a second. Then, with a sigh, she walked over and sat beside me. It's not, she said gently. I don't know. It's my space, you know? There was something rehearsed about her tone. Like she was trying to sound natural but had already prepared an answer. I didn't look away. You've never cared before. She let out another soft laugh, shaking her head. Come on, Leo. You're being weird. I hated how effortless she made it seem. How easy she could make me feel like the irrational one. I almost backed down. Almost let it go. But then she stretched, arms up, body arching slightly before she flopped back onto the bed with a sigh. And in that moment her phone lit up again. Still on the kitchen counter. Still face down. But the glow against the dark walls was unmistakable. Another message. My blood turned to ice. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even glance toward the kitchen. Which meant she was expecting it. My mind reeled. My breath came in slow, uneven pulls. I needed to be smart. I needed to be careful. So I did the hardest thing imaginable. I let it go. For now. I forced a chuckle, shaking my head as I lay back beside her. Maybe I am being weird. Her lips curled into a soft smile, and she turned toward me, resting her head on my chest. Long night, she murmured. Let's just sleep. She had no idea. No idea that I was already planning my next move. I didn't sleep. I lay there, feeling her chest rise and fall against mine, her breath warm against my skin. But all I could think about was the phone sitting on the kitchen counter, the messages waiting to be read. Something was wrong, and I wasn't going to let it slide. At some point in the night, Marlene shifted, rolling over, her breathing deep and steady. She was asleep. Now was my chance. Carefully, I slipped out of bed, moving as silently as possible. I felt like a thief in my own house, creeping toward the hallway, my pulse hammering in my ears. When I reached the kitchen, my heart nearly stopped. The phone was gone. I stared at the empty counter. The exact spot where I had left it, where I knew she had left it, was now bare. I swallowed hard. Had she come back for it? Had she seen the messages and panicked? A shiver ran down my spine. I turned, heading back to the bedroom, but froze in the doorway. Marlene's side of the bed was empty, and then I heard it. A whisper. Muffled, hushed words coming from down the hall. The bathroom door was barely open, a soft glow peeking through. She was on the phone. I stepped closer, straining to hear. I don't know. He's acting weird. I think he might suspect something. The breath caught in my throat. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Her voice dropped even lower. No, he didn't see anything. But I think I should delete them just in case. My pulse spiked. She was talking about the messages. She was covering her tracks. I took another step. The floor creaked beneath me. Silence. Then, the door swung open. Marlene stood there, her phone in her hand, eyes wide. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely shaken. Leo? Her voice was careful now, cautious. I stared at her. She stared at me. The air between us shifted. I knew. She knew I knew. And there was no turning back. There are moments in life when everything slows down, when the world around you feels frozen, suspended in time. This was one of them. Marlene stood in the doorway, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her fingers were curled around it so fiercely, it was like she thought I'd snatch it from her. Her breath was shallow. I could see the rapid rise and fall of her chest. I knew she was hiding something, and now she knew that I knew. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she did what I had been dreading. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an apologetic one. It was calculated. Leo, she said softly, tilting her head slightly. What are you doing up? I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was such a simple question, but the way she said it, the way she framed it, made it clear she was trying to regain control. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Couldn't sleep. She nodded, her lips pressing together. eyes flicking toward the dark hallway behind me, as if checking to make sure we were alone. A slow breath passed through my nose. I needed to be careful. Very careful. I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. Was just going to get some water. What about you? Her eyes flickered just for a second. She hadn't expected me to ask. Oh, she said quickly, gripping the phone tighter. Just had to check something. Work email. A cold weight settled in my stomach. She was too quick with her response. Too prepared. And after everything tonight, the message, her hesitation, the way she suddenly cared about privacy, this wasn't just paranoia anymore. I wasn't wrong. She was hiding something from me, and I was done pretending otherwise. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. Mind if I see? Her body stiffened. Barely. But I caught it. She laughed, shaking her head like I had just asked for her ATM pin. Leo, come on. That's ridiculous. My jaw tightened. Why? Because, she exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. Because it's late, and you're acting weird. This is crazy. Crazy. Another tactic. If I questioned her, I was crazy. If I wanted the truth, I was paranoid. I should have been furious. I should have demanded answers right then and there. But I didn't, because something deeper, darker, had settled in me. I wasn't just dealing with a lie. I was dealing with someone who had already decided to gaslight me into submission. And that meant she wasn't just hiding a small secret. This was big, and I needed proof. I forced a small chuckle, rubbing the back of my neck. You're right, I said lightly. Maybe I'm just tired. She studied me for a second, as if trying to figure out whether I meant it. Then, slowly, her shoulders relaxed. See? She said, stepping past me and heading toward the bed. We're both just exhausted. I nodded, following her, but only on the surface, because in that moment, my mind was already spinning. I knew what I had to do next. The plan. Marlene thought she had won. She thought she had dodged the bullet. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't done. As soon as I lay down, I made up my mind. If I was going to get answers, I had to be smarter than her. I needed to get into that phone. I needed to see those messages for myself. But I couldn't do it while she was awake. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I waited. I pretended to sleep. I kept my breathing slow, steady, listening to every shift of the blankets, every quiet movement beside me. It took almost an hour, but eventually, Marlene's body relaxed. Her breathing evened out. She was asleep. Carefully, slowly, I slid out of bed, moving inch by inch until my feet touched the floor. My heart was pounding. I had one shot at this. I turned toward her nightstand. The phone was right there. But just as I reached for it, she shifted. I froze. Her breathing hitched for a split second, then settled again. Still asleep. I let out a slow exhale and picked up the phone, my fingers trembling as I pressed the power button. Password. Of course. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Think, Leo. Think. Then it hit me. I had seen her unlock her phone 100 times. Muscle memory took over. My fingers moved before I could second-guess myself. The screen flashed open. I almost collapsed from relief. I was in, and what I saw next made my blood run cold. The betrayal in black and white. There, in plain sight, were messages from a saved contact with no name. Just an emoji. A simple, meaningless symbol hiding something much worse. A thread of deleted conversations, timestamps that made no sense. Marlene had been texting someone at the event, while sitting next to me, and then, buried beneath the list of messages, was something that made my entire body go numb. A hotel reservation. My breath caught in my throat. Not just any hotel. A boutique one. The kind that didn't cater to tourists but to affairs. The check-in date? Tomorrow night. For 2 guests. My heart pounded against my ribs. My hands shook. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. This was premeditated. Marlene had planned this. She was going to that hotel with someone else. And she had no idea that I had just discovered everything. I put the phone down. Carefully. Quietly. Then I sat there, staring at the dark ceiling, as realization settled over me like a suffocating weight. My wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman who had smiled at me just hours ago, was cheating on me, and she thought she had gotten away with it. But she had no idea what was coming next. I sat there in the dark, the glow of Marlene's phone fading as I placed it back on the nightstand. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, but my mind was eerily clear. The weight of the truth settled over me, heavy yet strangely freeing. I had my answer. No more doubts. No more second-guessing. Marlene, my wife, my partner of 7 years, had been planning this for a while. The hotel reservation wasn't a spur-of-the-moment mistake. It was deliberate, calculated. She had chosen to betray me, but what she hadn't chosen was what came next. The decision. For the first time that night, I felt a calm wash over me. There was no point in anger. No point in yelling, accusing, demanding explanations. I had already won the moment I saw that reservation. Marlene had no idea I knew, and that gave me the upper hand. I wasn't going to be the fool sitting at home while she went off to her business meeting at a boutique hotel. No, I was going to walk away on my own terms. I stood up, my movements silent, careful. I didn't need to wake her. I didn't need to hear her excuses or let her manipulate me into doubting what I had just seen. Instead, I acted. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick message to a friend I trusted, a lawyer. He had once told me, half-jokingly, that if I ever needed to prepare for a clean exit, he could make it happen. Tonight, I was taking him up on that offer. I packed a bag, just a few essentials. My laptop, my important documents, clothes for a few days. I wasn't going to waste another second in this house, in this situation. By the time the sun began creeping through the blinds, I was ready. Marlene was still asleep, peaceful, unbothered. She had no idea that when she woke up, I would be gone. The goodbye she never saw coming. Before leaving, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a short note. Not an angry one, not a bitter one, just the truth. Marlene, you lied. You hid things from me. And worst of all, you thought I was too blind to notice. I saw the messages. I saw the reservation. I know everything. But instead of waiting around for you to destroy what we had, I decided to walk away on my own terms. Enjoy your hotel stay. I hope it was worth it. Leo. I placed the note on her nightstand, right next to her phone. She wouldn't be able to ignore it. Then, with one last glance at the place I had once called home, I grabbed my bag and walked out the door. A new beginning. I didn't look back. As I drove away, the weight on my chest grew lighter with every passing mile. I had wasted enough time doubting myself, questioning my instincts, wondering if I was just imagining things. But now, I was free. By the time Marlene woke up, I would be long gone. And when she reached for her phone, when she saw my note, when she realized I was never coming back, that would be the moment she truly lost me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Because I wasn't the fool she thought I was. And I was never going to be that fool again.